I think the other one was actually specifically sent through to you by myself, and both the RFD for the trading license as well as the two-page. Just to indicate that I think the challenge here was always that there were errors that were identified by members of the ELS on the RFDs, especially the import and export. The import and export have a lot of pasting and copying and pasting, largely because the three licenses for transmission, one for trading and one for import and export, were all applied at the same time. And in some cases, although there were three separate applications, perhaps the applications themselves didn't quite distinguish it as well as it was meant to be in terms of what the law, Section 13.3 of the law, requires us to actually tackle these licenses. However, having said that, can I then maybe just go through the trading license? Again, apologies to members that may not have had an opportunity to actually go through the detailed RFD for the trading license, because perhaps an incorrect one was attached. But I'll take it that at least in respect of the two-pager that has been read, I'll just highlight a few things, just to indicate that the ELS is here. It recommended, the purpose of this submission is to request the Energy Regulator to approve the application for the trading license by the NTCSA, which was recommended by the Electricity Subcommittee. By way of background, as indicated, that the ELS of the 5th of September had a conversation on this, and it then recommended with the enhancements and the clarifications that are detailed in Table 1. I'll just highlight a few of those, not in any order, but in the order in which they appear on the table. That members had raised issues around the proposed term of license, because in the RFD, or rather in the submission, there was an indication that the proposed term of license for the trading license would be 2 years, but there was also reference to 5 years, and the question is which was the correct one. So and also members had indicated that it's important that whatever term of license that is proposed must be substantiated. So the consensus from the members was that the term of license should then be 5 years, to allow for a smooth transition period. And I'll explain the reason for the transition. It's one of the issues that were raised by members. I guess also members wanted to know the effective date of the application. And there was a little bit of discussion on this, in the sense that the applications themselves, as indicated, were received in November 2022. But the issue is the completeness of those applications and some of the issues that then emanated from those applications. For instance, the issue of how the Section 34s would be handled, because NTCSA was of the some Eskom Holdings wanted the NTCSA to be the one that to whom all of the Section 34s are actually transferred. So they in fact had included that as part of the application, but clearly the single buyer activity itself, which NTCSA was applying for, at this stage is not a licensable activity. But there was there were lots of holdups because of that. But there are lots of other holdups that effectively the actual application, when the applications were actually accepted, could well be deemed to be closer to January 2020, end of January 2023, when then the NTCSA was then requested to advertise. But also the challenge that then emanated is that in terms of the law, the 3 licenses are actually needed to be applied for separately. For instance, transmission, the operating of transmission in terms of section, its transmission system is defined and it excludes trading, and therefore that needed to be tackled first, and hence why it was handled first. And then upon that license being granted and understanding the conditions of that license, only then could then be the other 2 licenses be considered, so that there will then be alignment in respect of these 2. There were other issues that were raised in respect of the new information that emerged. However, that's where the actual delay in terms of these licenses, why these licenses only were actually tackled by ELS on the 5th of September. The third issue that was raised by members, which now talks to the transition issue, was the members had raised previously anyway. This was not just at this meeting, at the meeting of the ELS of the 5th, but the issue of exclusivity, because NTCSA Trader was applying for exclusivity on a number of areas. Firstly, the exclusivity in terms of it being given the exclusive rights to be the buyer in respect of the Section 34, which issue was dispensed with in the sense that that is not a licensable activity, and also the decision in terms of who the buyer sits with the minister is not something that the regulator actually can make a pronouncement on. But secondly, that it applied for exclusivity in terms of buying power from all of Eskom plants to have the sole right to buy power. And then thirdly, it also applied for exclusivity in terms of it being allowed to only sell to Eskom distribution and, of course, to export. Now, this issue of exclusivity, unfortunately, is not supported by law, and it's not supported by the objects of ERA, and this issue was raised. However, what was then discussed was that we needed the regulator needed to then consider the issues of transition, in the sense that at this stage, this is the status quo. Distribution is the contact point for all of the municipalities buy from Eskom distribution at this stage, and in fact that is where the actual interface with customers currently is. And also at this stage, we don't have a wholesale tariff as NTCSA indicated, but we only have a retail tariff. And that retail tariff is actually, in fact, is approved by the regulator, but the regulator does not set that retail tariff or those retail tariffs. So we actually needed to then give ourselves time for transition. And then lastly, we all know that there is an Electricity Regulation Act amendment bill in Parliament, and it brings with it a number of possible changes. And therefore, it was felt that to allow for enough time to transition to whatever that the bill will then impose, whatever condition that the bill will impose, is that it's important that we give NTCSA sufficient time for that transition, and hence we landed on a number of 5 years, but with a view that in the 5 years, there must be a transition or some kind of activities that are aimed at transitioning the system from the current vertically integrated system into a properly unbundled system, or unbundled tariff environment, or unbundled value chain as may be prescribed, and also to take into account perhaps the introduction of a market operator. So in essence, that is. I thought I'll spend a bit of time on that, and that talks to also to it. Yeah, it's that whole paragraph. It basically talks to all of the issues that are actually in respect of exclusivity. So, Chairperson, with that, we can then answer questions that may emerge from members. However, the recommendation from the ELS is that the Energy Regulator approves that the NTCSAP issued with a trading license, including the license conditions contained therein, and that the Energy Regulator knows the transitional arrangement which are captured in the draft license conditions, and then, of course, approves the reasons for decision, which are included as Appendix 8, again, with my apology that perhaps incorrect ones were attached, and that the correct ones will then be attached. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumete. And Faye, I hope that you have uploaded, or you're in the process of uploading the correct attachments, the RFT for item 5.1, just so members can engage with them further over and above what Mr. Kumete has shared. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Kumete and team? By a show of hands, please. Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. You may go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, this makes it a bit difficult because we don't have an RFD, and now we're limited to issues that were raised by ELS members. And I do get the explanation from Mr. Kumete. We also don't have the draft license conditions. And so so we are restricted really to the 2-pager. And it's a bit difficult for me. But maybe let me just pose one or two questions. So in terms of the whole question of the buyer reassignment from the current ESCOM to NTCSA, I just wanted to check why this could not have been made a transitional condition in the license for existing PPAs, because for future ones, the buyer gets specified in the Section 34 determinations. So, and I noted that there's a process of amending those agreements, but I was just wondering why this could not be done in the form of a transitional license condition to say all existing PPAs, the buyer is designated as the NTC SA. And then in the application itself, there is mention of that, and this is on page 7 of 28 of the actual application for a trading license. There's mention right at the bottom of that particular page, page 7 of 28, of an aggregated wholesale energy tariff structure. Maybe if I can just get clarity on that issue and on what is envisaged. Because the NTCSA will sell energy and capacity to ESCOM distribution on an aggregated wholesale energy tariff structure. If maybe I can just be clarified on that particular issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sivanda. Mr. Kumete, I think there's just one question from me. What I wanted to find out is that in the trading license for NTCSA, do we have transitional arrangements, say, for instance, for a period of a year, or 6 months to a year, where there are certain arrangements that ESCOM can carry on with, for instance, the procurement of energy and the supply already, because we know that the transmission network is not, it only links up to the ESCOM distribution network. So all the other distributors were buying from Eskom distribution. So with that being NTCSA, what are the plans going forward? Is there a plan where the infrastructure will be upgraded or put in place to ensure that even people who are not part of NTCSA can still access that network and purchase directly from it? I think that's what I just wanted to find out, just to make sure that everyone has got a fair chance, and also, in promoting competition imperatives. Obviously, it's understandable that in the early days, it won't be easy because, Eskom is quite a huge organization. So its network goes far and wide, and it wouldn't happen overnight that the systems and the infrastructure are changed to be able to link up with other entities other than Eskom distribution or NTSA in this case. Thanks. That's all from me. Over to yes, Mrs. Banda, do you have a follow-up question? Or another question, sorry.
Yes, Chair, sorry, my apologies.
Not a problem, go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to check with respect to the term of the license. So my understanding is that the 5 years is basically to cater for the transition into full unbundling. Now, I'm not sure whether then setting a specific time limit of 5 years would actually then suffice, or do we want to then probably have the 5 years but also coupled with the full unbundling? I don't know how to structure that, but whichever comes first, because it could be that the full unbundling will be done within the next 2 or 3 years before the 5-year term, or it could be after the 5-year term. So perhaps the earlier of either the 5 years or the full unbundling, obviously getting the correct terminology for that, so that it's not entirely just reliant on the 5-year period, if maybe that can be considered. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sibanda. Over to you, Mr. Kumete, to respond to the questions posed. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, I would just to direct members. Ms. Mube has uploaded the correct RFD. Again, with our apology that it's we had an incorrect one first. So if members could maybe peruse to that, and with your permission, perhaps if there are further questions that may emerge, we can maybe tackle that. Maybe just to start with the first question asked by Mr. Sibanda around the bias and assignment. And I'm going to ask legal to assist. I know Mr. Mrati is on leave, I think, today, but he might be able to assist. He might have joined. But the issue for me, the first one to explain this is that the central purchasing function, or the central buyer function, or this function that was applied for at this stage is not a licensable function. In fact, the major delays that came from this application were in reference to this, that the NTCSA being assigned as the buyer, whether in the transition or in the long term, that really it's something that is a decision of the minister. To that effect, I think there was an application that was made by the NTCSA to the minister to have it to be assigned. And that would come to us as for concurrence, but that decision is a separate decision. It's got really very little to do with this training license or with any of the licenses that have been applied for, because this function itself is not licensable. The assignment is the assignment, or who the buyer is actually that assignment is made by the minister in the determination. It is not for NERSA to make any blanket approval of any of those. The minister will then is the one that will determine who the buyer is, and we then, as NERSA, would be asked to then concur with that. But that's a separate function. So it's not a licensable function. And I think that's where the challenge always was. In the amended bill, in the amendment, it is clearly indicated, or it is indicated that this central purchasing function will indeed be the central purchasing function will be a licensable activity. But that's in the future. In the current environment, it is not. So I'm hoping that's quite clear. But if the colleagues from legal would like to add to what I've said, please do when I finished responding. In respect of the aggregated wholesale tariff structure, I think, Sibanda, the challenge with this, Chairperson, is that at this stage, the regulator only approves. It only sets the revenue, the allowable revenue for Eskom as a vertically integrated entity. And then within Eskom itself, they've got these transfer prices that they may agree on, but the only other thing that the regulator then approves, it's the Eskom retail tariffs. The Eskom retail tariffs themselves, in the build-up of those Eskom retail tariffs, they may well include transfer prices, interdivisional transfer prices, that the regulator at this stage does not get involved with. So this reference to an aggregated tariff structure, wholesale tariff structure, would be something that is within Eskom. It is not something that the regulator can make a pronouncement on, because it is not something that the regulator would have announced, would have pronounced itself on. So I'm hoping that's clear, Chairperson, and maybe unless I did not understand the question, Chair, but from what I would understand is that we have to, from where we are as a regulator at this stage, we only set the allowable revenue for a vertically integrated Eskom, and then we then approve the Eskom retail tariffs. Anything else that happens in between would have been something that happens within Eskom. Any interdivisional transfer prices would be just interdivisional transfer prices that are agreed within the divisions of Eskom. So that is the issue, and I'm hoping I've answered the question correctly, or that I've understood the question correctly and therefore answered it properly. Chairperson, your question, what are the plans in terms of transition to allow access by others? The transition period, Chair, which is envisaged in this 5-year transitional period, is in fact intended to do a few things. Firstly, there are those municipalities that are clearly buying, that are connected to Eskom, are connected to the Eskom distribution network. However, there are those municipalities that are connected to the Eskom, to the what is now NTCSA network. Now, however, the actual pricing that is related to that and any other agreements that are related to that will still need to be transitioned. So the transition is in fact intended to deal with that. So at a technical level, there may be technical challenges, some of those things that need to be corrected, but there's clearly, yes, there may be some investments that may need to be made by some municipalities so that they can buy from transmission, or they can take power from a transmission level. But there may also be a transition where some of the would-be transmission assets, or rather things that might be looked at as currently under transmission, but they're actually distribution assets that they may need to either be transferred to Eskom distribution or to sold off to those municipalities that may want to buy. But all of the transition is needed to actually deal with that. But along with that, Chairperson, it's the whole concept of then saying, when transmission sells to municipalities. At this stage, municipalities buy from distribution, so all of the infrastructure in terms of the retailing is actually handled by distribution, and transmission is not geared up to trading with all of this multitude of customers. So there's a need for that transition. So hence the 5 years. The 5 years intended to allow for all of the transitional issues, including legal contracts, technical issues, commercial agreements, and so forth. There are lots of things that need to be dealt with. But over and above that as well, risk mitigation, because essentially there are risks that, as we all know, the risk that Eskom distribution is facing in respect of non-payments, for instance. That risk will then transfer to NTCSA. So there are lots of issues that need to be tackled in the 5 years. But then maybe to talk to Mr. Sibanda. The issue is that over and above the issues that I may have raised in terms of the transition period, which the 5 years is aimed to do, it recognizes, by the way, Chairperson, that the exclusive sale might not be supported either by the era itself existing or the amended era. Neither will it be supported by all our laws in the country in terms of competition laws and what have you. However, this is a necessary transition period from transitioning from a vertically integrated arrangement to this unbundled arrangement. Is that when we're talking about the actual license, Mr. Sibanda, the issue of unbundling, the issue of transitioning, remember, it's not just the actual unbundling of the value chain, with transmission being taken out, and I think in the not so distant future, distribution also being taken out as a separate legal entity. That is the actual value chain unbundling, whether it's the legal unbundling or is actual physical separation under different companies. But there are lots of other issues. For instance, the introduction of a market operator and making NTCSA to be that market operator will in its own bring other conditions to the NTCSA. For instance, if the NTCSA is a market operator, it then raises the question whether the NTCSA can also be a referee as well as be a player. So that needs to be clarified. In the 5 years, that's going to be dealt with. But also, as the question that we have asked above around the wholesale tariff, there's a need to unbundle the tariff for all sorts of reasons. But there's a need to unbundle the tariff, and that on its own, there is a transition that needs to be allowed for that between 2 and 5 years. But so hence this 5 years. But we have to note that the transition itself, if not specifically indicated in the ERA amendment bill, once the bill has been adopted into law, and it imposes a particular structure, that structure will actually then have to be adopted. So if that happens within 2 years, well, within 3 years or 2 years, unfortunately, then the transition will be limited to that period which is allowed by the amended era. So there are lots of moving parts, Mr. Sibanda. I'm really hoping that I have addressed the question. I've addressed the question adequately. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumete. Members, we've got the item in front of us. I'll just go to the recommendations. Faye, if you can please assist with the recommendations for item 5.1. On which page are they? Okay, the message is noted on the licenses on page 67 onwards. Faye, can you assist? Where are the recommendations for item 1?
I'll check for you now, Chairperson.
Please, truly appreciate it. Don't think we have them on the item, but Mr. Kumete did.
They're on page 5. Page 5 of 5, Chairperson.
Okay.
Of the 2-pager.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Yes, thank you so much. Members, we've got the item in front of us, which is the application for a trading license by the National Transmission Company of South Africa, SOC Limited. The recommendations are that the Energy Regulator approves that the NTCSA be issued with a trading license, including the license conditions, and 2, notes the transitional arrangements captured in the draft license conditions, and 3, approves the reason for decisions for the NTCSA trading license application attached here to as Appendix A. Members, by a show of hands, are we happy to support these recommendations from ALS? Thank you, Ms. Precious Sibia. Thank you, Mr. Gumede. Thank you, Ms. Semane. Thank you. Someone's hand came up, but I didn't see who it was. Mr. Spanda, you're not supporting? Is Mr. Mkiza not in a meeting?
I've raised my hand, ma'am.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you.
Maybe it was your hand. Yes, Mr. Mkiza. I'm also happy to support the recommendations. Mr. Spanda, didn't pick up your hand.
Chairperson, Chair, I'm happy to support recommendation 6.1 and 6.2. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right. Members? Oh, all right. No, okay, you have reservations with the reasons for decision, having not read them in greater detail. Okay, members, I think the majority of the members have supported the recommendation, and thank you very much. So item 5.1 has been approved by the regulator as per the recommendations. Thanks very much. Over to you, Chairperson. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Mugos, Deputy Chairperson. Thank you, colleagues. I see the 2 hands, Mr. Gumede's hand and Ms. Mube.
Chair, I was going to request, maybe to recommend that because the RFDs were not published on time, perhaps it is only fair that members get given an opportunity to go through the RFDs, that maybe as a matter arising on the RFDs, if there are any issues that members may want to raise later on before the RFDs are finalized and published, that members perhaps can be given an opportunity to do that. I don't know whether it's customary or even if it's procedural, but so that at least we can give comfort to the members that if there are any issues in the amended RFDs, because the RFDs which said that if there are actually issues that members are uncomfortable with, that they are given an opportunity to comment on that. So, but I don't know in terms of procedure, Chair, how that could be handled, but so that we can make those members that are feeling uncomfortable, that they can actually get an opportunity to actually read through that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gumede. I suspect, Faye, that's what you were going to ask or ask around that area.
Yes, Chair, but I'd like to start with an apology for the mix-up and also to request a closed session after this meeting in the closed session to raise some issues, Chair, without trying to take away from the mishap that has taken place. Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay. Faye, I think I'd indicated that we scheduled to finish at 11, so I'd indicated maybe by 10:30 we'd have that, but members sometimes do not prefer to have something that just gets raised at the time. So if it is something that you could just flag, but maybe it gets discussed, it's discussed with the right documentation and members have applied their minds to it. But the other members may want to add, and we can then ratify in the meeting the 28th. Will that be in order, Faye, with our procedures and the processes?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. And colleagues, can I then ask that we go to item number 5.2, the import and export license, and I think Mr. Gumede, this would have similar issues, so if you could take us through, Mr. Gumede.
Thank you, Chairperson. But import and export, as was applied for in this particular case, given as an allowed activity as part of the NTCA transmission license. So this is over and above that of its transmission and systems operation, as well as in respect of trading. So, Chair, we are here to request the Energy Regulator to approve that the NTCSA be issued with an import and export license. In the main, this was the RFD or the submission that had suffered a whole lot more, had a lot of RFD, and that was to the extent possible within the time period given those changes were indeed effected. But in essence, what I'm then saying is that this application was not necessarily dealt with in greater extent, or it was considered by the ELS, but there were not too many issues that were the members just raised the question of whether this application was take into account the impending changes that are going to come with the ERA amendment bill. And the answer to that, to the extent possible, those were considered. However, the decision could only be made. The decision by the ER can only be made based on the current law. However, the changes considered, so that at least whatever proposals that are made will not be in total contradiction to what is envisaged going forward. There were questions asked about whether NTCSA had applied for an exclusive right to import and export power, and the answer to that was that NTSA had not, in this particular case, applied for any exclusivity of the ER to actually approve either. And of course, the period of 20 years, the term of license, the question arose in terms of the term of license. And this one, again, Chairperson, because of the need for alignment between this and the system operation, import and export applies both to the power that is traded, that is bought and sold for profit, as well as power that is bought and sold in respect of the system and transmission and systems operation, is that there needed to be a balance between that the term of license for this one, for the import and export license, is aligned to the tier the recommendation is that the term of license should be 25 years. Chairperson has indicated there were not too many issues with respect of the import and export license. However, the RFD is annexed in this particular case, and the recommendation to the ER is that it approves that the NTCSA be issued with an import and export license, including the license conditions associated therewith, and that ER approves the RFD for the import and export license application, which is annexed here to as Annexure A. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Gumede, or inputs that they would want to add on to this.
Chair, let me start probably item 5.2 annexures. I think it's the last, Mr. Gumede. On page 2 of 88, just above your section 3, the last sentence that says how it is nevertheless recommended that NTC. So I wanted to check whether are we aware whether the NTC has engaged with the Commission to confirm that this transaction is not notifiable, whether we do have such on our part. And then with respect to the license conditions, and that's starting from page 78. So there's a whole opinion or what it, yeah, but there's a write up on the Commission considerations with respect to this specific license. And there are certain issues that are being raised, and I think they are quite important issues that have been raised. There's a high possibility, or there is incentive. Let me put it that way. There is incentive for the NTC to engage in market foreclosure and discrimination, obviously. And for me, I would have loved to see the issues that have been raised in that write-up, translated into license conditions. Otherwise, then it becomes, not much of help. Unless, of course, there are reasons why that has not been done. And then going into the actual license and the conditions, the definitions. Starting with the definitions, there's a definition of licensee, and it says it means entity, import and export. And I thought that the licensee is actually the NTC itself, because that is the applicant for this license. So then it should necessarily be the licensee. Maybe if that can be clarified. And then sellers, definition for seller means the generators or any successor-in-law selling contracted capacity from the agent to the, I think that should have been to the importer or exporter, which is the NCT. NTC. And then the definition of import and export, shouldn't that refer to cross-border buying and selling instead of a commercial activity within the area of the network service provider? I thought that the import and export relates to the cross-border or international buying and selling of electricity. And then perhaps under import and export license, if you can just indicate the relevant section of the ERA, I think that will help. Definition of import and export, just specify the section of the ERA. And then under 4, licensed activities, clause 4, licensed activities, from 4.4 to 4.6, maybe we may just need to rephrase these so that they are full sentences, or have them as a subsection that perhaps start with a sentence that says something like the licensee shall fulfill the following activities, and then you can include everything from 4.2. Otherwise, 4.4 to 4.6 as they are, they need to be rephrased so that they're full sentences. And then maybe if I can then go back to the item that says 5.2, that's the first item on that list. And I'm looking at page 18 of 31. So I noticed that there's an agreement, a power supply agreement that expired. I think that's NEM Power Scorpion Zinc Mine that expired, but there's no indication. Well, I guess the question really that I had is whether there are any issues as to why this could not be renewed, because if you look at the rest of the other agreements, it's either they are currently being negotiated or they are to be reviewed, and then others are still obviously in operation. But this specific one expired, and maybe unless there are confidentiality issues, if not, perhaps I just wanted clarity as to what happened there and why it was not renewed. And similarly, there is an issue relating to, I think it's cross-border agreements that were negotiated by government and were unable to evaluate those because of confidentiality issues and the like. And my question was whether, are we satisfied that perhaps there's nothing in those agreements that might have implications for this particular license? I know we could not get a hold of them, but it's just a concern that wouldn't there be issues that might affect this particular license? Sorry, I just missed the relevant paragraph where this is discussed, one of these documents, but I'm sure somebody might know what I'm referring to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Asbanda. Let me just check. I don't see any other hands in this. So in the meantime, Mr. Kumete, are you able to address I think starting from page 2 of 88?
Thank you, Chairperson. We'll be assisted by the team. I must admit, in some cases, because of the referencing, maybe it's just our numbering as well. I couldn't quite follow all of the issues that were the location of some of the issues that Mrs. Banda was raising. But the one on page 2 of 88, okay, maybe can I start like this and say, Chairperson, maybe to actually start with some of the last issues that were raised by Mrs. Banda, especially in terms of agreements, to indicate that Mrs. Banda, some of the issues were included here for completeness of application, but they were not necessarily considered in respect of the application itself. For instance, the expired contract, the expired agreements, and so forth, were not necessarily part of the evaluation. The evaluation was in respect of or rather to look at import and export itself, the license, in terms of the issues that are peculiar to that application. Unfortunately, when it comes to import and export, unlike the other terms that are defined in ERA, import and export is not defined in ERA. And therefore, even in terms of the some of the conditions that say may be applicable, say in section 21, 2 or 3, in respect of transmission system itself, where there are specific prohibitions. Import and export does not actually, unfortunately, indicate those. So those are the challenges, I think, that in fact, in evaluating the import and export license itself, it wasn't as easy as it is to evaluate the other licenses which are specified. For instance, trading is defined, and issues that are related to trading are clearly defined. For instance, the issue that you are raising, perhaps that concern you are raising on the I think it's the annexures, the document which is indicated as annexures, the one that has got an opinion, the one of 88, which has got an opinion in respect of the engagement between NTCSA and the Competitions Commission. This most likely fits in very well with trading, not so much about import and export, because in respect of how import and export, at least for the purposes of this license application, was considered, was whether somebody can buy and sell power across the border. That's about it. And there's no exclusivity that has been applied for in this particular case. So it's just really saying, if you're already undertaking a particular activity, can you then undertake that activity across the border? So this is how, in fact, the import and export license was how it was set. It was an additional power to powers that you already have. So it's not exclusionary. So some of the issues that are raised here could well not necessarily belong to this, but rather belong to the trading license. So, but I think in others, Chairperson, like the actual definitions that are there, I think those are enhancements, issues that can be enhanced. But I don't know, Chairperson, with the assistance of the team, I don't know if, for instance, legal would like to assist, or any of the team members would like to assist with the questions asked by Mr. Sibanda, taking into account that I really did sometimes struggle to actually follow, to actually locate where exactly, which page Mr. Sibanda was referring to. With your permission, Chair, I'd like to get a legal to expand if there's anything that they need to expand on, or any of the team members, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Komedo. We're gonna get someone from legal, but I think in the parts around the definitions, like of your licensee, the seller, cross-border, and all of those things, I think Mr. Sibanda was providing guidance, and there probably is no requirement. Is there? I'm not sure. There's along any boardroom. Can you mute? Thank you. So I think those are definitions that we must have. The fortunate part for this, Mr. Sibanda, is that in what we are having, we don't have the actual. I mean, we still need to have those license conditions. I think we would use what we have done is that it's a draft. This is what they must look at, and it still must come back. So we still will have a second bite on the cherry on this one. And I think on the issues like that, the market foreclosures and discrimination issues that may arise from this must be made license conditions. I still don't see a hand of who's gonna come from legal to give the inputs. Is this okay? Ms. Mkhize, please come in.
Morning, Chairperson, members, colleagues. Chair, just on the point of the license conditions as it relates to competition aspect, I think if I heard Mr. Sibanda correctly, there is a concern around that. Chair, we did take the approach that because matters of competition lie with its regulator, that we would tread carefully on this aspect, taking due cognizance of where the regulator needs to step in on the side of discrimination. But you are correct, Chair. We will still share these conditions and maybe enhance them a bit better, just to bring out the point that we are talking about as it comes to discrimination. Chair, I agree with you on the definitions. We'll expand it. Mr. Sibanda, you correct there. On the other side, Chairperson, I think Mr. Sibanda referred to whether, okay, let me rather say this, Chair. In Section 10 of the ERA, particularly E and F, there is a requirement there that the applicant must give a description of the plans that they will be undertaking in terms of this license that they're requiring. Please excuse me, Chair, the background noise. I'm unfortunately in court. Please excuse me. And the detailed specification that must be provided. Yeah, this links to the question where Mr. Sibanda said, are we comfortable that there are agreements that have not been provided as it pertains to cross-border activity and the like? And do we think that this license is not, just paraphrasing, maybe compromised or not, maybe would need to be relooked at in that light? Chair, we're saying that the application is complied with the general description that we needed and the information that was required in terms of Section 10 in order for this license to be granted. Not sure, Mr. Committee, if there's anything else. But yeah.
Thank you, Madam. I think we have covered it, and also I thought also in terms of definitions, clearly we do need those. I did see as enhancements as well. We do need to tighten those up, especially those aspects that are not defined in the Act that we may want to actually tighten. But other than that, Chairperson, I think we have responded to the questions. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Sibanda, may I just check with you if there's a point that you needed clarity on that may not have been addressed, and I also need to check with you if you have your comfort around the fact that we are still going to have another bite on the cherry with the conditions, license conditions.
Chair, I'm fine with the process issue. However, I'm not entirely in agreement with the view that issues of discrimination and the likely or possible discrimination should be left to the competition authorities. We are a sector regulator. We've got a mandate on these issues, and if our basic mandate really is to preempt, any possible abuse in the system. So I am not entirely in agreement with that approach, and I think that there is enough guidance that has been provided with that write-up for us really to craft license conditions that can assist in terms of ensuring that the behavior of the NTC is appropriate and that there is no likelihood of or that it prevents discrimination and market foreclosure. So for me, Chair, that's quite an important issue. Otherwise, then we're not discharging our duty as a regulator. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. But for me, Mr. Sibanda, I'm of the view that we are going to get these license conditions crafted to ensure that we do our part. And I think the part I was saying that it would be our second bite is when they come from having been given to the licensees draft license conditions. But I am aligned with what you're saying, and I think we do our part in this, and we will leave the other part that other authorities have a mandate to do to them, but when we have a mandate to do things, we will do them. Mr. Mane, I see your hand.
Thanks, Chair. From my side, it's just a generic one, which is kind of with regards to the completeness of these applications. Obviously, I just didn't want to bring this. I don't know whether the issue of bringing the application first and then conditions later, then also the reasons for the decisions, is it in our terms of reference or is it in our legislative frameworks? Because from me, then it deprives us an opportunity to see holistically what are we deciding on. And obviously, without wasting time, in my other experiences, we used to just have this picture as a whole, because it's all good and well to issue the license, but the devil is always on the details, especially the conditions. So for me, if it's something that is within our powers to change, I would like going forward that we have all that information at the go, so that when one reads all these things, you can take everything into account. Thanks, Chair. Unfortunately, I've got a call. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mane. We note that, and I think ideally, colleagues, what we would like to have is a decision, the reasons for that decisions, and license conditions. But I think with license conditions, at times you have to accept that we would approve as a regulator the draft license conditions and give the applicant an opportunity to comment before we approve. But I think the reasons for the decision, we don't need a view of the licensee. Mr. Kumet.
Chairperson, I just thought I'll talk a little bit on the license conditions. Those are covered actually, and we'd like to get the members' contribution to those. But those are actually essentially extracted, and they are indicated a little bit from page 14 of 31 in the main document 5.2, where we do indicate whether in terms of because the areas where the areas in which the energy regulator can impose conditions are explicitly indicated in terms of section 14, and there's an indication in the table there of the issues that we do believe that are applicable to this license. So we just request members to just go through that and see whether is there anything that perhaps has been erroneously left out, and maybe if there's an area that we need to expand on, so that those issues from A to W can then be expanded on. But I just request members that we actually go through that. But in terms of the conditions, clearly these licenses are issued with conditions, and the question is whether those conditions, as we have looked at whether we've analyzed that correctly, including the issues that were raised by Mr. Sibanda, to the extent to which they can be linked with the areas where the regulator has got powers. So those are clearly indicated in terms of section 14. We just request input from members if they can do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Covent. Ms. Subia?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, from my side, I think what Mr. Kumete is saying, I do agree with it, but I think as the energy regulator, however we look at the conditions for the license, let us also look at the other side to say we are not making it impractical for the license to actually work with conditions maybe that might be onerous to the person or to the licensee. So that is also the other part. Maybe we need to also think about to say whenever we put a certain condition, it should also not be something that will have issues for the licensee to meet. But I do understand the issue of making sure that we are working within the regulations, but we need to enable the industry. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think, colleagues, Mr. Kometa, you're right that section 14 talks about that. And I mean, there's always a section, I like section Z, where you can also add anything that's incidental to this. But when you look at the powers and duties of the licensee, there are also things there that are imposed, such as that there should be non-discriminatory access and to the transmission and distribution power systems to third parties that are approved by the regulator. And I think it is that complete circle that Mr. Sibanda was saying we must look at as we have raised it. I don't think it would be misaligned when we look at that. So when we get them back, we will have that full view of when we get them back, because we'll approve them now as draft for the licensee to comment. And then when we get them back, I think let's have that holistic view of these things. On that note,
it's noted and agreed, Chairperson. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Chogo?
Chairperson, good morning and thanks. Just one thing that Ms. Mane has just raised about reasons for decisions. Chairperson, I think we understand her, but we are saying the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act actually allows us 90 days to craft those reasons in such a way that they make sense to the person that we are giving them to. But I think it's true that in this meeting, the members are aware of the type of reasons that we are leaning to. We just make sure that we craft them in such a way that they would make sense. It's true. I would agree that normally the best price is to actually have reasons for decisions when you give decisions, but we have the reasons. We just have to articulate them in such a way that we cover every single aspect. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Chogo. Members, may I then take you to, I'm just getting the page. I only see the conclusions. Faye, can you assist? I think I'm looking for the page with the actual recommendations from the electricity subcommittee.
Checking, Chair.
Is page 2 of 31, Chair, of the main submission, 5.8 and 5.2?
Thank you, Mr. Gumede. I am on page 2. I think it is recommended that the energy regulator approves the NTCSA to be issued with an import and export license, approve the reasons for the decision for that import and export license that are attached as Annexure A. I think we have then indicated that even with the reasons for the decision, we are going to allow for members to give additional inputs. And in that part of the reasons for the decision, where there are those draft license conditions, we would also still come back and enhance them with the inputs that the members have given. So by show of hands, colleagues, if you're aligned with the decision that's here and the proposal that is added to this. I've got Mr. Mani, Mr. Pungosa, Mr. Kumeda, Mr. Mkiza, Mr. Spanda, Mr. Bia. Thank you. Then we have the decision. Can we, with the little time that we are having left now, can we go to item number 5.3, Mr. Kumed?
Chairperson, thank you. This one is actually a fairly simple one, I hope, but we'll explain the issue that was raised by Madam Simane earlier. Again, the ELS is here to recommend that the energy regulator, firstly, let me just see this thing that is run properly. Note the actual standard offer, the standard offer PPAs, and the EPP PPAs, as well as the risk data allocation, as the risk allocation in respect of the PPAs. In essence, this is maybe Chair, just to so that maybe for the benefit of Mr. Man as well and other members, is that when the MYPD 5 year 2 and 3 were approved, these were approved to include a provision for the standard offers. So there were 2 years in this particular case that was approved. However, the standard offer contracts that were signed by Eskom perhaps could have been longer than that, which will then go beyond the approved revenues. So in fact, here there is no additional cost that is envisaged other than that was already approved in the MYPD 5 year 2 and 3. So all it is right now is to indicate that Eskom has then subsequently gone out and negotiated these PPAs, and that they will then use that amount that is provided for, the amount that is provided for in the MYPD 5 to actually recoup the costs that are associated with those PPAs. Chair, I think just to take to the, I'm hoping I have then explained, but the issue here then arises that then says, in respect of the costs that are actually not being provided for, because those costs go beyond the 2 years of the 2 remaining years of the MYPD 5. The question was, can the regulator make a decision on that? Hence the item 6.3. which then said for those years where there is no provision yet for the cost recovery of the costs associated with those programs, that the regulator cannot, of course, make a decision thereon. And Chair, I know that sometimes we do indicate in the 2-pager, the correction has been made appropriately in terms of the MYPD 5 and MYPD 6, but I noticed that in other parts of the document, there may well still be gremlins that may refer to MYPD 4. In fact, the decision on page 4 of 5 still needs to be aligned to the recommendation, which is on page 3 of 136. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kumede. May I start with you, Mr. Mane, because I think the explanation that Mr. Kumede has provided may assist in clarifying what you needed to clarify in the decision that we can truncate and not say anything further than what is said.
Yes,
Mr.
Chair, I've got, yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to Mr. Kumet. I've just got the correct reference now. This is page 3 of 136, which is page, I think it's page 3 of the 2-pager, where the recommendations are on 6.3. It says they will not confirm the cost recovery of the programs beyond the approved MYPD 5, which is fine. Then my issue starts where it says, but commit that ESCOM may include these costs in the MYPD 6 for the energy regulators' decisions in line with MYPD 5 decisions taken by the energy regulator on the 12th of January 2023. So I felt that why should we add that part? It's like, to me, taking putting, I don't know, pre-committing, but I think it muddies up. I don't have the correct word. It muddies up the decision. So why do we include that sentence after the but why are we including that part? So that's what I was saying. That to me, we're supposed to just end with MYPD 5 and not proceed to decide anything after that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mane. Mr. Kumete, if we modify the decision like that, would that cause any harm?
Chairperson, I think now that I'm now reading, I'm hearing Ms. Mane properly, I think that makes a lot of sense, in the sense that those applications for cost recovery during MYPD 6 will be considered at the appropriate time, and therefore, yeah, I think she's correct, Chairperson. I think we can expunge that the last bit.
Thank you, Mr. Kumete. Can we then modify that? Colleagues, I asked Mr. Mane not because I was not wanting input from the other members. The submission is open for discussion. I don't see any hands. With that modification that we have done of truncating this beyond the after the part where we exclude the confirmed part, may I see by a show of hands, colleagues, if we are approving this submission? I've got Mr. Kumete, Mr. Spanda, Mr. Bia, Mr. Mane, Mr. Mpungose, and Mr. Mkize. Advocate Sitole, in all of these, I've been assuming that you are raising your hand silently.
Yes, Chairperson, if you can hear me. Yes, I do support all the submissions that have been discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Colleagues, we have now come to